Very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Hard Talk HR webinar, Up Close and Personal with Professor Dave Ulrich. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you. Really excited to be here. My name is Mihai Nagy. I will be your webinar host, and I'm the founder and director of the HR Congress conference series. Literally, people are joining in from all over the world, so it's a unique opportunity to hear Dave Ulrich in person and the move of the profession. Before we start the session, I'd like to mention the overall goals. Hard Talk HR, connecting ideas with impact, and that's the basically two column of this 1 hour webinar, which is about new business realities and how HR professionals add value, connected with how HR can improve the work that gets done in organizations. I would like to keep it as interactive as possible, so please do share your questions throughout the webinar. You find on your right-hand side of the GoToWebinar panel a question box. That's where you can type your questions as you go along. And provided we have time, we shall be able to answer your questions. In case your question doesn't get answered, not to worry, it will be forwarded to Professor Ulrich, and he will again, time permitting, but he will reach out to you individually to make sure that you get the answers to your questions. Please do tweet with us. We have the HR Congress 17 hashtag. We are tweeting ourselves about the webinar, so in case you are not able to follow us, just look up this hashtag later on, or share your thoughts on Twitter and drive some traffic, so let other HR professionals learn about the issues we are covering today. And I'd like to take this opportunity to mention that on 28-29 November, Professor Ulrich, together with an elite panel of subject matter experts joining the HR Congress in Brussels, where it will be a unique opportunity to meet over 800 HR professionals from pretty much all over the world, mainly, of course, the European region. And as a webinar attendee, you are qualified for a 20% discount from your ticket using the coupon webinar. So for details, just visit HR Congress, hr-congress.com as the website. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the speaker of the day, Professor Dave Ulrich, Rensselaer Lickert Professor of Business at University of Michigan. Probably doesn't require much of an introduction, an author of several books on HR and over 200 articles. Is probably the most well-known and the most influential figure in the world of international HR, a father of modern HR. And so I'm really happy, privileged, and excited having Professor Ulrich here on board. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to him, and let's start the webinar.
What a privilege, what a delight. I thank you so much for that introduction. And I am very privileged to be a part of this webinar that hopefully triggers your interest in the November session in the HR Congress in Brussels. As you can see, the ideas with impact is the message we want. There are 4 topic areas that I'm hoping we can cover in the ideas with impact area. 1 is the disruptions in HR that everybody should know. 2, what do we know about the business partner model and where is it headed? And I'll spend most of my time on those 2. 3, how do you become a strategic positioner? And 4, what's happening in talent? Now, as Mihai and I talked about this webinar, we made a decision, and I made most of the decisions, that I'm going to have far too much content. So be warned, you're going to get overwhelmed with ideas. To get the details, again, you need to come to the Congress in Brussels in November so that we can get into those details. But without further ado, let me get started. I want you to leave this session with some ideas that will help you in your own world be a better HR professional. And I said those are the books. The top right book is the latest book. We hope you'll look at it, and I'll allude to it. Before I get into those 4 themes, let me just talk about the major trend in what HR is doing, and it's about value creation. At the individual level, the principle is I am successful not because of what I do, but because of what somebody gets from what I do. With my spouse of many, many decades, the value of a gift is not what I give her, it's what she defines as the gift. In leadership, it's not enough to be an authentic leader. In fact, leadership authenticity is narcissism unless you create value for somebody else. The same is true in HR. HR is not about the practices we manage. It's about the outcomes that come from those practices. And so in HR, it's not that we do staffing or training. We do that so that we help the business win. And the message that we have in our latest book, the same is true in organizations and countries, is that HR is not about HR, but about the business. Now, why is that so critical? We've heard from Michael Porter in a brilliant way about the 5 forces for strategy. I think there are 4 forces for the new HR that change our context. At the top left, the social, technical, economic, political, and environmental changes in the world are huge. When we ask anyone, anywhere, what's happening in the world, obviously technology and digitalization and the Internet of Things, but we also have social changes with rural to urban and demographic changes and environmental changes, political changes, obviously, in every part of the world. Bottom left, those changes are happening quickly. You've heard the word VUCA, volatility, uncertainty. It should say complexity, not change, and ambiguity. How do we move so quickly in the organizational life that we have? Top right, we have stakeholders getting connected to each other. The employees connected to the customer, connected to the investor. And bottom right, those of us in HR are especially attuned to the emotional and personal effect of isolation, of indifference, and the erosion of confidence among many people. What do all those things add up to? HR has to create value. We have to do things that help us win. And HR is not about HR. It's about winning in the marketplace where we have to serve. With that context, AI has suggested that I talk about 4 things. 1, given that new world of HR, what are the disruptions that we should know and understand? 2, what are lessons learned about business partners? 3, how do I be a strategic positioner? And 4, what then is new in talent? Now again, I could cover this for hours on any one of these boxes, but I'm going to give you a very quick overview of the menu of ideas that we should be aware of. The first is disruptions. Because of those 4 forces and the enormous rate of change, HR is being disrupted, and I'll pick 3: outside in, information, and technology. These are 3 of the areas where HR is being disrupted. If I'm an HR professional, I need to understand these areas so that I can create that value and add value through HR. Let's go into detail on each one. Outside in. In workshops I run, I often ask the question, what's the biggest challenge in HR? And we see an evolution of those challenges from an administrative challenge, which is true. We have to do work more efficiently, to a functional challenge. We have to hire, train, and pay, to a strategic challenge where we connect HR with the strategy, to an outside-in challenge where we use HR to deliver and drive business results in the marketplace. In the outside-in challenge, HR is connected to the customers, that context we talked about, the stakeholders we talked about. Those external factors shape the HR practices. In staffing, we don't want to be the employer of choice. We want to be the employer of choice of employees customers would choose. We involve customers in training, performance management, rewards. Everything we do inside HR can be used so that we win in the customer and the investor marketplace. That's a disruption. HR is not about inside, it's about outside. A second disruption is information and analytics. Actually, let me go back to the first disruption. One of the disruptions with stakeholders that's really fun is to ask ourselves the question, who are the customers of HR? That's that top right of this picture. Almost always the customers of HR are seen as the employees of the company. In the disruption we see, the customers are not just the employees. They're also the customers of the company, the real customers who pay money, and the investors of the company outside. When we see that, we disrupt HR and look outside in. A second disruption is information and analytics. Again, this slide has way too much data, and it comes from Wayne Brockbank, my dear colleague in the Mideast. Here's what he's captured and others have seen: the speed. Speed of data is fast. Access to information, storage of data, volume of data, changing technology. Down at the bottom right, here's what we know in information: anytime, anywhere, anyhow. This webinar is a great example. We have on this webinar well over 1,000 people, 2,000 registered, all over the world, connected through the technology that allows us to connect in a very close and very intimate way. Information is incredible. And there's stories that you know and I know about that information. Here's what's fascinating about the change in information, again from Wayne Brockbank. In the world today, there's two kinds of information. One kind of information is what Wayne calls puzzles. It's the structured information. It's information found in spreadsheets. And the ambiguity in the world of information is solved by facts. These are analysts who look for statistical patterns. I like to do statistics. I like to look at big data. This information is critical because we find answers. The other kind of information is mysteries. And that's 80% of the information in the world. Instead of being an analyst, we become an anthropologist. We look for the unstructured, the new ideas. We ask questions. In the HR space, we have structured data. That's the puzzle data. We look for the data in the big data, the analytics, but we also have to look for the data in mysteries. What does this mean? In managing analytics today, the disruption occurs as we go through 4 phases. In the first phase of data, we have scorecards. In fact, in the 1990s, I did a book called HR Scorecard with 2 great colleagues. Today, I think that book would be out of date because the scorecard is information, mostly structured data about how we perform. Then we have big data, the structured data, the analytical data that gives us insight into what we do, predictive analytics. Now we're beginning to look at unstructured data that gives us information on intervention, which HR practice has impact. And now in disruptive HR, we shift to impact. What does the business require and what HR information will be helpful? And again, what we're finding is some of that data is structured and some is unstructured. So the disruptions in HR. We have disruptions in HR around where we focus. Instead of focusing inside, we focus outside. That's the outside in disruption. We have disruptions in HR about analytics. I'm about to do a column, and in November it will be out by then. And it's actually a kind of risky column. Analytics is really an exciting place to play right now. Everybody in HR is almost, this is an American word, and I apologize for those not with English, but gaga. They're excited. It's the shiny new ornament, the shiny new object of analytics. So in our research, we did analytics on analytics. We studied analytics and the impact on the business. Here's what we found, almost none. Let me say that again. HR people and HR departments that do analytics do not drive business success. Here's why. We're at phases 1 or 2 or maybe 3. Until analytics gets to phase 3, which is impact, we're not driving the results we should drive. And impact of disruption is we don't start analytics with what HR is. We start analytics with the business. Here's the 4th disruption. Excuse me, technology. And again, let me evolve those disruptions. At the bottom, I think technology has built incredible systems and platforms to manage efficiency. And we use technology to take our existing work and do it more efficiently. Then we use technology to do innovation. We have some incredible innovators, and many of you are on the phone or on the webinar or listening afterwards in staffing and training. And technology enables us to upgrade those practices. Then we use the technology to access information. The previous slide, we use technology to get both structured and unstructured information to bring knowledge inside. But here's the rub. Where technology needs to go is in increasingly building connection. One of the data points from those 4 forces that shape our world is that people are increasingly feeling isolated from each other. The average 18 to 25-year-old today spends, in America, I don't know the data from the rest of the world, about 6 to 7 hours a day in front of a screen. That could be their iPhone, it could be a tablet, it could be an internet, it could be a television. That technology tends to isolate us. And what we've discovered is the isolation is a dangerous thing. And in HR today, we need to find ways to use technology to create social networks, to build emotional connections, and to help people connect in more positive ways. In fact, the research on isolation is scary. That social isolation has more of a correlation with mortality or death than smoking, drinking, or obesity. some of the physical causes of death. Our job in HR to be disruptive is to use technology in a new way. Whoa, I just blitzed you in that first column. The disruptions in HR that we should know. I hit 3 of them, and they're really profound. Number 1 on the left-hand column, HR outside in. The goal of HR is not to do things inside better, but to do things outside. The stakeholders of HR are outside the firm, not inside. And those stakeholders are customers and investors of our organization. Number 2, we need to evolve analytics. When we look at the analytics of analytics, it's not about a scorecard. It's not about insight. It's about impact on the business. And number 3 in that left-hand column is technology. Technology is not just about putting the HR existing systems on a platform. It's about innovation and about information. But ultimately, the disruption in HR is how can technology connect people? For example, we do a training program. Those who attend can use technology to be connected with each other. And again, it's not terribly complicated technology to build social groups or LinkedIn groups where now that we've met each other through training, we become connected, and that connection enables us to not feel isolated, but to have resources to be effective. Top of this slide, HR is not about HR. It's about winning in the business. Left is disruptions. Now we come to the second column. The business partner model has been around about 20 years. We did a book in 1987 that really pulled those ideas together. What's happening in that model and the evolution of HR people in those disruptions? And I'll talk about 4 things. The shift in the evolution of the business partner model, outcomes of HR, organization, and leadership. Here we go. Business partner model. When I ask people, what's the business partner model, almost always they tell me it's a role. It's the HR generalist. It's the HR person who sits in a business unit. My sense is that's grossly misrepresenting the model. That's like saying my cell phone is good because I can, or my smartphone is good. I said cell phone. That shows that I'm still one of the older folks who get locked into an old mindset. My smartphone is good because it can give me a voice and I can call somebody. Well, that's only 5 or 6% of what a smartphone can do. A smartphone today can connect me to the world through this incredible device in the palm of my hand. It can give me maps. It can give me information about restaurants and food and directions. It can connect me with people through LinkedIn or Twitter. Well, that's the business partner model. The business partner model is not a role. In the last few months, there have been studies about do away with the business partner model. That's crazy because the business partner model has 12 or 13 things. I know you won't be able to follow this. This will be in a LinkedIn article, and we'll talk about it at the HR Congress. But when we started to put together not the role of business partner, but the logic and the trends, here's what we found. And I'm going to go quickly through the left-hand side on a couple of pages. Business partner starts with an assumption of value added. And I did it on the previous slide. We moved from efficiency to functional to outside in. It requires, number 2, an understanding of the context. And we talked with those forces of the world that are changing us, the context around social context trends, pace of change, and individuation. Number 3, it requires a clear assessment of our stakeholders, who we serve. We evolve from internal stakeholders to external. Business partnership, then number 4, requires on outcomes. What does HR deliver? And I'll end this webinar by talking about talent. How do we increase the employee productivity and the employee experience? And what are those trends? Number 5, the business partner model talks about an outcome as organization, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. It's not just the shape or the alignment, it's the capability. Number 6, business partner model talks about leadership as an outcome, and I'll talk about that in a minute. How do we build leadership? Number 7, the business partner model and the logic talks about the strategy of the HR department, what we're known for, who we are, what we deliver, and getting that strategy right. Number 8, the business partner model talks about our HR organization. You could put a big circle around this one. This is traditionally where the business partner model goes. What's the role? What's the structure of HR? Absolutely critical. And the headline on number 8, the HR structure should match the business structure. So there are times when HR is a single business and functionally organized. There are times when HR is responding to multiple businesses. Number 9, the HR business partner logic says our HR practices should be managed in a more aggressive way. They should be integrated, aligned, and innovative, and ultimately simple. Number 10, our HR business partner model requires new competencies of HR people. We should match those competencies to the skill set that we need. And I'll talk about that in just a minute, especially around strategic positioner. Number 11, I already alluded to it. A good HR business partner logic has to evolve the information or analytics. That's one of the disruptions. And remember, we talked about the scorecard, the insights, the interventions. And a business partner model moves me. Number 12, we talked about the HR business partner model affects technology from efficiency, doing better, to innovation, doing better HR, to information, to connection. And finally, number 13, the HR business partner model talks about a focus on relationships, both inside HR and across functions. Whoa, take a deep breath. When somebody says, so what does the business partner model require? It's not about a role. I'm a business partner because I sit in a geography serving Latin America or Eastern Europe or North America or Asia. Or I'm a business partner model because I'm an HR generalist in a line of business. The business partner model is not just a phone call on a cell phone. It's all of the skills of a smartphone. And in fact, those 13 points, and I'm not hung up with 13. Maybe there's 12, maybe there's 15. If those things don't go together, the business partner model is not fully effective. For me, this gets very exciting. And it says HR is not about HR, it's about winning in the marketplace. And the business partner concept that does those things will help us succeed. Many of the limitations of the business partner model is when we look at it only through one lens. Somebody says, again, I'll finish, and this will be the last time I use the metaphor, my phone is not working well because I'm only doing phone calls. Well, if that's the only thing we use our smartphone for, we're missing all of the apps that could come. The business partner model requires a broad focus. Let me now go deep into 3 parts of what I just went through. One of the most critical things of a business partner model is understanding the outcomes. So if I were to ask you the question, if HR is effective, what will happen? What will happen if HR does their job well? Because good business partners are not what they do, but the value they create from what they do. I wish we were able to do this in a scoring sheet, but we were worried about time, and I want to make sure we leave some time for questions. 10 points. On your left hand, if you look at your left hand, there's 5 fingers. Those are the individuals. Good business partners help those people do a great job. As business partners, we build talent, competence, workforce. We build people. On your right hand, imagine it closed as a fist. Those people come together in a system. So it's not talent, it's culture, it's not competence, it's capability, it's not workforce, it's workplace, not people, it's process. So here then is our ultimate bias. On my left hand, HR business partners help individuals. On my right hand, they help organizations. If you had 10 points to divide across those two, what outcome does the HR business partner most deliver? Is it the left hand, the individual, the fingers, or the right hand, the organizational fist? In your own mind, divide those 10 points. How much do they deliver business results? Do business results come from individual or organization? One way to frame that question is to imagine the following scenario. There's a business meeting. At the head of the table or in the middle of the table is the general manager. She or he has responsibility to win in the marketplace. Around that table are the finance people who bring economic and financial data, the marketing salespeople who bring customer interest data and net promoter scores, the manufacturing people who bring operational efficiency. What do we bring? Is it the left hand, the fingers, knowledge about talent, or is it the right hand, the fist, information about organization? Here's what we've discovered. When we did the test with 1,200 business units, 32,000 people, talent, the left hand, organization, the right hand, the bottom right of this picture of culture. Organization and culture had 4 times the impact as talent. Let me say that again. Organization had 4 times the impact of talent. In our 10 points, we would give talent 2 and organization 8. So stop and think what that means. Let me add one other thing before I do that. We put leadership between those two because leaders shape talent. People do what their leader does. Leaders also shape organizational culture. The way leaders behave becomes the culture. So here's the takeaway. When I and HR come to the business discussion, finance brings economic data, marketing brings customer data, manufacturing, operational data. We bring 3 kinds of data: talent, culture, and leadership. And what we found is that this 80-20, organization over leadership, is so key. In the World Cup, where we in the United States have never won, but there are clearly those around the world that have, 80% of or 20% of the time, the winner of the Golden Boot, the best talent, is on the team that wins the World Cup. In the Academy Awards, 20% of the time, the winner of the Actor or Actress Award is in the movie that wins Movie of the Year. In other words, talent, not just in HR, but in organizations and in sports and in movies, is effective 20% of the time. 80% is organization. Then in the Academy Awards, the winner of the Best Director of the Year is in the movie that wins Movie of the Year 80% of the time. That's why we put 3 things. When I walk into a room, there's 3 outcomes I provide: talent, leadership, and organization. If I'm an HR professional, those 3 things should be top of mind. When I'm an effective business partner, those are the things I bring. Let me now go deeper into organization. Organization is not about our structure. It's about our capability. A capability represents what we're known for and good at doing. It's a combination of the social skills and the organizational skills that bring us together. A great business partner is not just good at managing structure, but capability. Let me give a quick example. If I were in a workshop and I would say, name a company you admire, there are companies around the world that you could name. You might name Apple, you might name Amazon, you might name Unilever, you might name LG out of Korea, you might name Samsung, you might name somebody out of Japan, Panasonic, you might name somebody out of Central Europe, Siemens. And then I would say to you, how many levels of management do they have? And almost everybody would look at me and go, I have no idea. I don't know how many levels of management Unilever, Siemens has. I don't know how many levels of management any firm has. Why do you admire that firm? You admire that firm because of their capability, what they're good at doing. Unilever is socially responsible. Siemens is innovating in new markets. LG is building customer focus with their innovative products. Amazon is successful through the internet in their discipline and efficiency. What a company is known for is their capability. Business partners have the duty of building capabilities. We have a 5-step approach for doing that. Again, I know I'm covering a lot. You won't master the 5 steps. We could go deep. But what we've got to do is look, here are capabilities a company might have. We win because of talent. We win because of speed of marketplace. In the consumer products area like Unilever and Procter & Gamble and Nestle, the first mover advantage is so key. We win because of our culture, because of our reputation and our identity, etc. Our job as business partners is to audit that capability. Here's some fascinating data, again, from this recent research in Victory to Organization. Which of those capabilities have the most business impact? Notice external sensing, speed. How well are companies doing those in 1,200 businesses? What's really interesting is top right. Talent is done incredibly well, but today it doesn't have the impact. Look at the bottom right. External sensing, that's information of the markets. The bottom right, speed, innovation, culture. Those are the capabilities that have impact, and we in HR as business partners can do that better. Leadership. Leadership is another one of those key outcomes. And our simple view is that as business partners, we should answer 4 questions for leadership in the organization. Why we need leadership. Why is leadership so critical? What good leadership looks like. What are the requirements of leaders? How to build leaders and how to be a more effective leader. In building leadership, we've done a book called Leadership Brand. There are 6 steps to building leadership. We hope as HR people, we know what those steps look like. We built the leadership code. What are the skills of leadership that every leader should master? We hope your organization has that code and can do it inside your work. Oh, take a deep breath. I have started at the top of my chart with a very simple hard talk question. And we could have renamed this Hard Talk with Lots of Stuff. But here's the headline at the top. HR is not about HR, it's about the business. In fact, at the top of this model again, HR is not about HR, it's about the business. The hardest paragraph to write in any book is the first paragraph. And the most difficult sentence is the first one, because that sentence needs to capture the message of the book. Here's the first sentence of our new book. Victory Through Organization is the book. HR is not about HR, it's about the business. And I talked about that, the contextual changes that makes HR win. So we go to the left-hand column. What are some disruptions we should know? And I listed 3 of what could be 8 or 10. We've got to be outside in. We've got to see the world through the eyes of customers and investors. It's not about what we do, it's the value we create for others. We've got to shift analytics from simply measuring the scorecard to measuring the business impact. And in fact, in the piece I'm writing on the analytics of analytics, if we're not creating business impact, analytics don't create value. We've got to change technology from simply doing things more efficiently to connecting people in a more intimate way. Those are the disruptions. The second column, we've got to change the logic of business partner. Business partner is not a role. I work with my business leader, therefore I'm a business partner. Business partner requires, and I think there were 13 things. This is the assessment of the context and the future of business partner. I went deep on 3 of those. We have to focus on value-added outcomes. And in HR, it's not just the talent, it's the organization. And then I talked about building capability, not defining the organization as structure, but capability and leadership. Building a leadership brand through leadership code. Whoa, we could stop this webinar now and your headache is probably huge. The message is HR is not about HR. Now let's go to the next. So given all of that, what does it take to be a great HR professional? Beyond knowing the business, how do I be successful? I want to provide some context around HR competencies and then some details around strategic positioner. In Competencies of HR, we have studied this since 1987. And in fact, I encourage you to, if you have a chance to, I hope you'll get on LinkedIn. I just published a week ago an article that shows the evolution of HR competencies, how those competencies have evolved over 30 years. In the last round of data, we collected data on 123 competencies. And if you notice on the right-hand column, we have about 3,900 HR people having others, about 28,000 other people reporting on their competencies. Here's what we found. In the world today, there are 9 domains of HR competence. That's the 123 items that we studied. At the top, HR professionals have to be good at the strategic enablers that help us connect with business, managing culture and change, human capital. And we use the word curation. It's not just managing people, It's like a museum curator who nourishes and helps the people. In marketing, the word curation is what people do with their brand, and total rewards. Those three competence domains help us build and connect with strategy. Along the bottom, there are foundation enablers. We have to do compliance. We have found around the world, and one of the great case studies is Singapore, where we just have to make the trains run on time. We have to do the day-to-day. We have to use analytics, and I've talked about that. The evolution of analytics to interpret data that drives impact. We have to use technology. I've talked about the disruptions there, to use technology as an integrator and connection. But in the middle, we found that competencies are not the goal. The impact of the competencies are the goal. Here's what we found. Being a credible activist at the right enables me to get invited to the business meeting. So if I'm a credible activist, I get invited. I get connected. I get to talk to people. If I'm not trusted, people don't want me in the meeting. But how do I deliver real value? Paradox Navigator helps me build business value. In fact, that's a fascinating finding that I hope in the future we can discuss. Again, we'll do it at the summit in Brussels in November. Can I manage the inherent tensions that Paradox requires? The strategic positioner allows me to drive stakeholders. And strategic positioner is the competence that helps me win with the marketplace. Again, here's a summary of our findings. What are the overall competencies? There's 9 general ones, 3 core drivers, 3 strategic. To get invited to the business table, we have to be a credible activist. To represent stakeholders, we need to manage employees inside. But if it's outside, we need to be a strategic positioner, and I'll go in more detail. How do you create value? Navigate Paradox. And then back to the finding I talked about, the department has 4 times the impact of the individual. With that in mind, we decided in this webinar to give you the evolution of being a strategic positioner. How do I, as an HR business partner, in that whole logic, be a strategic positioner? Here's what we found. Again, the disruption and the evolution. We have to know the language of the business. Finance, marketing. I could demonstrate what that means in terms of language. Moi, j'habitais à Montréal pour 3 ans, donc j'ai dû parler en français pour ces 3 ans. I've just demonstrated I can speak bad French. But I speak enough of the language of business to get around. I lived in Montreal for 3 years. I spoke French. That's the level of language. I don't have to be 100% fluent in French to get by in Montreal. I don't have to be 100% fluent in business to get by in business. I don't have to know enough about business to be the chief financial officer, but I have to know enough about the language to have a conversation. We in HR should know the language of business. Second, to be a strategic positioner, I should know how my company makes money. Money is a goal of business. It's one of the guardrails of business success. How do we make money, and what is our strategy? What differentiates us? Where do we play? How do we win? Third, I need to understand my stakeholders. Part of being a strategic positioner is understanding our customers, who they are, why they buy. It's understanding our investors, either debt or equity, how they invest in our company and how we can build that investment. Understanding our communities. Strategic positioners understand the context in which strategy occurs. That's the 4th level. The social, technical, economic, political conditions. And again, a good strategic positioner starts with basic business knowledge, strategy, stakeholders, and context. And when I'm in HR and can do those things, I add incredible value. Back to our table of contents. We're trying to give you an overview of what HR should do to be successful. Now I want to talk about where HR is grounded. HR is obviously grounded in talent. Talent, human capital, managing people is the root of HR and has been for decades. What are some trends in talent that I as an HR professional should master and understand? First, It's not about the talent. It's not about the talent. It's about the impact of the talent. If we have better talent, what happens in an organization? And here's what we've discovered. Talent helps business execution. The right people in the right place with the right skills will help a business deliver. As a company shifts its business strategy from A to B, from product to customer, from product to solution, we need different people. Talent also affects customers. Talent drives customer loyalty. The correlation between employee engagement and customer engagement is very high. And so talent drives outcomes. Talent drives investor confidence. We published a book, Leadership Capital Index, where we've shown that good leadership and talent, especially in leadership, will have a 25 to 30% impact on investor confidence. We in HR should know that. And talent shapes our reputation in the community, how we treat people, how we deal with people. So one of the trends in talent is to not just look at talent inside the organization, but that it creates value for all stakeholders. A second trend in talent, I'm going to capture on this chart. We need to do three things in managing our people. One is competence. And my next chart will show some of the trends in that. Do we have the right people in the right place at the right time? Competence is the foundation of talent. We've got to have great people, but they've got to be committed. Commitment means you're willing to do the work. If we have high competence, our people are very talented, but low commitment. They don't work very hard. We have smart people who don't work hard. That's not real talent. On the other hand, if we have low competence and high commitment, we have very hardworking people committed, but they're not very smart. That's not very good. Today in the talent arena, we have to have both competence and we have to have commitment. Commitment has two forms in the engagement world. One form of commitment is willingness to do the work, behavioral engagement. I show up. I have an employee value proposition. I am at work. The evolution of commitment and engagement is contribution. I don't just show up. I show up with my heart and soul. So competence is one of the foundations, and there are a lot of evolutions in getting the right person in the right place. I'll talk about that. That's getting there. That's your head. That's the competence. Commitment is your hands and feet. I get my behavior in the room. My hands are there. My feet are there. Contribution is where the talent world is headed. I show up with my heart and soul. One of the places we've seen that, we did a book called Why of Work on that, is you bring your whole energy to the company. Today, one of the themes that would evolve our work is great work by a professor at Stanford named Carol Dweck around growth mindset. Do I come to work and build a growth mindset? As an HR professional, can I create a setting that removes threats and builds values and opportunities in people and helps people come with their entire heart and soul? So talent, trends, confidence, absolutely. Commitment, absolutely. Build a value proposition. But in the next step, it's contribution. Find meaning, find purpose at work through creating a growth mindset. One of the trends in that contribution, I'll just give an example, is the employee engagement survey. I think we used to ask questions that say, do you like your boss? Great question. But frankly, it doesn't correlate with much. Then the engagement question, does your boss give you the skills to do your job? That's better, because it's not about liking a boss, it's having skills so that you can do your job. The emerging question in contribution, does your boss help you find your meaning at work? So it's not about skills to do your job, it's finding meaning. And the other piece of that contribution piece comes from work by my dear colleague Marshall Goldsmith. Am I accountable for the meaning? So it's, do I do my best to allow myself to find meaning at work? And do I do my best means I'm accountable to work with my boss to find meaning. That's the evolution we see, from satisfaction to behavior to meaning and to accountability. Now, I said in the competence domain, we see some trends, and I'll highlight those, and then Mihai will have time for some questions if people do have questions. What people may be having is confusion, but we'll have questions. In competence, we've got to bring the right people into the organization. And you can see some of the evolution there. We set standards around culture and technical. We source candidates through technology and LinkedIn and referrals. We screen candidates with business leaders. We secure, we orient the candidates. Then we've got to move people in yellow through the organization. We build workforce plans and training and development through job assignments. We do career planning. We manage our high potentials. And then appropriately, we remove people from the organization. Again, they're trends in talent. Whoa. Let me go back to this page, which is the menu. And I love menus. What I've just done is assume that I've given you a very complex menu about HR. And this is my view of HR. It's an incredibly great time to be in HR. Why? Because at the top, HR is not about HR. Then in our menu, we have appetizers, main courses, drinks, and desserts. We picked 4 pieces of the menu that make HR a great place. Left, we talked about disruptions. Because of the changing world we live in, we've got to go outside in, see the impact of our work. We've got to use analytics for impact. We've got to use technology for connection. We've got to redefine the business partner from a role to a logic. And there's 12 or 13 things business partner logic requires. One of the key is we focus HR on outcomes, not activities. One of those outcomes is organization. We build capability in the company. And in fact, it has more impact than talent. We build leadership at all levels through the brand and the code. Third column, part of our menu. We've got to upgrade HR people. And let me just give an aside. It's for me one of the most exciting things we've found, and we've summarized 30 years of research. Over 30 years, competencies of HR people have increased dramatically. One of those increases is in business knowledge. We call it today strategic positioner. We've increased about 0.6 on a 5-point scale. We now know more about being a strategic positioner. And knowing that drives stakeholder value. And we talked about 4 phases of doing it. And then finally, talent. It's the bread and butter. It's the roots. It's the core of HR. We call it human capital curator. And we talked about building competence, bringing people in, through, and out of the organization, building behavioral commitment, and even more, building a sense of contribution. I know I have just blitzed you. If you don't have a headache, something is the matter with you. I know I've covered a lot. I'm going to turn to Mihai for questions. I hope you'll see articles on this on LinkedIn. I hope you'll attend the conference in November in Brussels. But most of all, I hope you can feel the incredible passion and the enthusiasm for HR, because it's not about HR. It's helping the business win. With that, I think we'll turn. We have about 10 minutes or so in our hour for possible questions.
Indeed, Dave. Thank you very, very much. It was really a hard talk, HR, with lots of stuff, as you've mentioned. It was an amazing webinar. Thank you so much. We do have time for some questions.
Let me tell you, Mihai, before we take the first question.
Sure.
We happen to have a log of people who stayed on. I've done a lot of webinars. We had about a 98% stay online through the whole diatribe. That is it. Now, you were multitasking. If you were on the webinar, you were probably doing other things. But a 95 to 98% retention line tells me that people really do want to learn. And I thank you for sticking with it. A lot of stuff.
Yes, indeed. And we do have some questions. So if you have any questions, ladies and gentlemen, please do come on board and ask those questions. Now, one question, if you don't mind, Dave, me asking, you mentioned business partner is not a role, but it's really the functions. Business partners, HR professionals provide analytics, insight, and the recommendation on talent leadership and capability to deliver business result and to serve all stakeholders. And that was a quote from one of your LinkedIn articles, 7 lessons learned from the HR business partner model. Now, my question is, many organizations, on the other hand, they certainly do have positions called HR business partner, senior HR business partner, and so on and so forth. But you mentioned business partner is not a role. So in this case, would you suggest that those organizations got it wrong?
Absolutely not. And again, I'll use my simple example of a phone. The phone should do voice. I'm on voice on a cell phone right now. The phone should do voice. But if that's the only thing I use my phone for, I've wasted an enormous amount of opportunity. And if the only thing we do for business partners is define it as your role, it's right. That's true. I have a television. If I only use one channel, then I've not maximized. I have a piano. If I only use 2 keys out of the 84 or 88 keys on the keyboard, I just missed an opportunity. It's not that it's wrong. It's just that it's very constraining. Now, let me also say I'm guilty. When I first thought of business partners in 1980, 97, or back in the 90s, I really thought more about it as a role. But I've evolved as well. And I think phones have evolved and televisions. And I think the evolution is that we shift from a role to a logic structure. And that way I think the role becomes much more powerful. And so, yes, if you have it as a role, absolutely. And also define it as an overall logic.
Very good. Now, let me ask you, tons of questions are coming in, so I need to cherry pick a few. For example, let me start from the beginning. Sam Redele asked a question about truly great topics, but if HR always has been supreme, keeping the status quo, can the same HR make the shift, or do we need a new CHRO without HR in the background?
I care less about whether the CHRO has HR in the background. What I care about is if they can do the skills that help the business succeed. So, and I've said this before, in fact, Mihai and I were talking about this before. In my experience, 20% of HR people are incredible. They have the competencies, they think about HR not as HR. 20% of HR people are not. They just cannot have the bandwidth to improve. 60% are in the middle. Here's my incredible optimism. Over 30 years, we've seen the 60% in the middle move to the right dramatically, dramatically. So can HR have value? Absolutely. And we see much more being added. And we have empirical data to show it. I'm going to answer very short so we can get as many as we can.
Okay. Julian Fisby asking a question. What is your perspective, Dave, on the fact that the business partner model has led to great many HR functions shrinking considerably, taking away opportunities to be strategic positioner, unintended or intended consequence?
I frankly just think that's not true because you have two things. Number one, can we do HR with fewer people? Absolutely. The same is true in every function because the technology enables more efficiency of operation. That's going to happen. Strategic positioners are actually increasing both in number and in impact. And so when you declare it as a fact, we have data from 90,000 people that says the opposite thing. Your fact may be your experience. And I'm so sorry for that because that's the bottom 20%. There are experiences where HR people are not doing the things we talk about. There are experiences where people use their cell phone for a doorstop. It's not very helpful. And I'm so sorry that that's the experience you've had. In most companies, the number of HR people may be shrinking, but the quality of HR people is going up dramatically, and their business impact has been hugely increased.
Some of the questions related to the webinar recordings and slides available. Yes, I'd just like to answer to everyone that yes, the slides will be available, and we are recording the webinar, so you may watch it later on demand. Now, one question is coming from Anuradha Mishra about the external stakeholders for HR and how they impact HR decisions. Can you please elaborate on them?
You bet. We cluster loosely 3 or 4 groups of external. One is customers. So if I'm designing leadership, my leaders should have the skills that my customers are promised in my brand. For example, we're doing, where I am in the United States today, we're doing a workshop that starts in a few minutes. And we're saying, what makes an effective leader? We have a competency model. 95% of firms have competency models. Do the competencies for our leaders reflect the promises we made our customers? So what we do is we say, show us your customer brand. Show us what you promise customers. Are your leadership competencies lined up with that? Number 2, investors. As I said, 25 to 30% of an investor decision is tied to leadership. Do our leaders have the competencies that give our investors confidence in future earnings? Great companies make that linkage. We just, and I tried not to name any companies because in so doing I missed so many others. But we've just been working with some companies auditing their investor confidence in leadership. And we've created a leadership capital index to do it. Communities. Does my leadership inside reflect the community expectations outside? When we can build HR against those external stakeholders, we create enormous value, and our success is huge. Mihai, I've got to ask you one question. What are one or two topics in the conference in Brussels in November that you hope people will leave with? What are one or two things that excite you about the November session?
The most important for us is that, well, our tagline of the conference is designing and building people-centric organizations, because we believe as well that only meaningful workplace is able to attract and retain talent that impacts the business outcome. And that's why we are designing all the topics. We have 12 areas of HR we are covering, but the main underlining message is how are we impacting business and people working in the business, and eventually they impact business outcome by retaining the right people in organizations.
You know, I really like that topic, and I'm sorry to cut off questions because, again, the headline, Hard Talk HR. HR is not about HR. It's about the business outcomes. And when we create good people who work in great environments, the business wins. And how do you define winning? Back to the previous great question. Winning is customers buying more product from us. We have a higher net promoter score with customers. Investors have more confidence in us. Our stock price goes up, our market value goes up, our cost of capital goes down. Communities with regulators where we live and work have more confidence in our brand. That's the stuff that I think HR is going to move towards. And it's why I'm so excited about the future of HR. And I feel so bad for the person who asked a question who doesn't have that experience, because it still exists. There are many companies where that is true. But where HR is contributing in the ways we've talked about, the opportunities are almost endless for the creation of value in the marketplace.
Dave, thank you very, very much for your insight and wisdom and willingness to share your thought and experience. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but don't forget the webinar will be available and all your questions will be forwarded to Dave. So time permitting, he will reach out to you individually and give you the answer, or combine it in some sort of white paper format, and we shall certainly share it with the community. Last but not least, I'd like to draw everyone's attention again for the HR Congress, where Dave, with an elite panel of speakers, will be speaking on 28-29 November at the EGG Brussels. So please, if you are available, please do join us. There's a 20% discount for all webinar attendees. If you visit the website hr-congress.com, you find all the details. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Stay tuned for future webinars. We shall be doing quite a few round of sessions in the forthcoming months, and you will all certainly will be notified via email. Thank you so much. Have a great day ahead if you are in the other side of the Atlantic. Have a great evening if you are in Asia Pacific, and have a great afternoon if you are in Europe. Goodbye. See you next time.